Welcome to the morning after 2015, one of the last shows of the week, of the year, actually, the last, probably, maybe one next week, I don't know. Let's take a look at what happened this week. First of all, we saw in one of the highest scoring playoff games in league history, the Bruisers take down the Horn Dogs 108-89. Kareem Hunt had 23 points for the Horn Dogs. The Bruisers had a big week in part because every single skill player scored at least one touchdown, which was huge. The Bruisers, in their history now, as they advance to Super Bowl 24, they're 1-1 in previous Super Bowls. They won Super Bowl 22 but lost Super Bowl 8. The other matchup saw the Black Dingoes fall to the Little Big Men 76.5-49. The Black Dingoes, like the Gargoyles, are now 0-3 in the playoffs. They still have not won in 8 years. Not quite as much as the Gargoyles, but he's getting there. In part because Antonio Brown got hurt early, only 1 point. Todd Gurley, also another big reason, 33.5 points all by himself. Little Big Men advanced to Super Bowl 24, and they are 1-0 in previous Super Bowls as they won Super Bowl 18. The fifth place game was for an additional $20. Remember, the Tices took down the Gargoyles in his swan song game, 76-43.5. Michael Thomas at 10.5 for the Gargoyles. The Tices were led by their running backs McCaffrey and Gordon. Had one of their probably one of the first times all year they both had a good day, 26.5 points combined. In battling for the OK Bowl, the Badgers took down the Price is Right, and the Garbage Men took down the Bucks. So the Badgers will look for their second OK Bowl as they take on the Garbage Men, who are looking for their first ever OK Bowl championship. So that sets up the two matchups for next week. Now we'll take a look at the prize money, stuff like that, and how it's going for the year. Cardinals, as I said last week, did have the most high point wins, so I get $15 there. Most points in the year, Bernie's Bruisers get $60. Horn Dogs and the Black Dingoes each have won $75. Next week, their matchup for third place is for an additional $25. Little Big Men and the Bruisers, have each won $200. The winner of next week's game gets an additional $125. Remember, Week 17 will be the Battle Royal for an additional $20 for whoever gets the high points that week. Consolation round, there are the previous teams that have won it. The Badgers and Garbage Men this year. The Badgers did win it last in 2015. So it sets up that matchup there in the OK Bowl. Now we're on to Fantasy Honors and the All-Fantasy team. The MVP, I think, is an interesting choice I made this year. I think it's probably the most appropriate. We'll have to see, though. The rest of them pretty much went as on the list as to who you'd expect. First of all, I think for the first time in history, I have not won this, nor did the Fighting Sasquatches, as the Price is Right had the most transactions on the year, and they win the Dave Pujic Award for most transactions on the year. Of course, David won the award when he was in the league, with multiple signings in the same night. Somebody's cutting the same guy and then re-signing them actually later. Eric Red Award is the Comeback Player of the Year. Todd Gurley, who was last year's draft bust, the Ryan Leaf Award, he won to this year's top running back, and that's not even counting his playoff performance for the Little Big Men to carry them into the Super Bowl. The Kurt Warner Award for the best undrafted free agent goes to Deshaun Watson, who, when healthy, was the top fantasy player in the league at almost 20 points a game. Quite phenomenal. It was a Michael Vick-like year, and the year Michael Vick went just crazy. I think he averaged like 20-some points. The one year where he went crazy. Crazy in a good way. The Tom Brady Award for the best late-round draft pick. Alvin Kamara was a 12th-round pick, and he ended up being the number 2 non-quarterback in the league. Number 2 flex player, because one kicker had more points than him, too. Going on now to the draft bust. While this was a close one, I mean, you could have had Julio Jones, who outside of one game has been miserable. David Johnson, Odell Beckham, Rodgers all got hurt. But one guy stood out, and that was Jay Ajayi, who was the 10th pick and ended up as the 41st running back and is now currently splitting time in Philly with Blunt and Corey Clement. So really just precipitous fall for him, getting traded mid-year. Not great. Now we'll head to the All-Fantasy team, and then we'll talk about the MVP of the league after that. All-Fantasy team, Russell Wilson was the fantasy quarterback. He had 17.4 points per game. In perspective, Drew Brees last year was the fantasy quarterback of the year, and he had 18.1. Top running back was Todd Gurley with 11.5 points. Top running back last year was David Johnson, 14.5. Also this year, Alvin Kamara for In Rodgers We Trust with 10.5 points. Number 2 running back. Last year's number 2 running back was Zeke with 13.2. Top receiver for the second straight year, wide receiver 1 was Antonio Brown with 10.5 points for the Black Dingoes. Last year he was the top receiver, but he only averaged 10 points. So he had a little better year this year than last. Number 2 receiver was DeAndre Hopkins with 9.2 points for Bernie's Bruisers. Last year's number 2 receiver was Mike Evans with 9.8. Hopkins had a tremendous year, was even more fantastic when Deshaun Watson was playing, but even still he's been really good. He hasn't fallen off as Will Fuller has without Deshaun. Number 3 receiver was A.J. Green with 7.7 points for TK's Bucks. Last year's number 3 receiver was Jordy Nelson with 8.6. Green had a kind of up and down year. Probably as a second round pick, still pretty good. But I think everyone expected a little more from him, but still good enough for number 3 receiver. The flex player of the year was actually a tie. Mark Ingram and Le'Veon Bell each had 9.3 points per game for the Bruisers and the Badgers, respectively. Both had really good years. Le'Veon Bell's really come on lately to be even more explosive. Last year's flex player, by the way, was Melvin Gordon with 11.7 points per game. So that was a big drop there. It's like the 3rd running back in the league. And all fantasy kicker this year was Greg Zuerlein, 13.9 points a game. The top kicker last year was Matt Bryant and Justin Tucker, who had 10.9 points a game. So a big improvement there. He had one of the best kicking seasons in fantasy history. And he's close to being my fantasy MVP this year. The defense this year was the Jaguars, who had 8.8 points per game for the Bruisers. Last year was 7.2 for the Vikings. So just a heck of a year for the Jaguars defense. Just a lot of sacks and held teams to low yardage and a lot of touchdowns too. So a heck of a year. And Bernie, I know you like the Jaguars, so that had to be kind of nice. Now for the fantasy honors. The biggest honor of the year is the fantasy MVP. You would assume by looking at that it would probably be Russell Wilson since he had the most points, or maybe it would be Todd Gurley. Probably be the playoff MVP, especially if Chad wins it. But this one actually is kind of unique. When he played, Deshaun Watson was really good, almost 20 points a game. But he only played, I think, like 5 or 6 games, so it's hard to give him that one. The guy I did give it to, though, played a few more games than that, and that was Zeke with 13 points a game, so he would have been the top running back. Last year, the MVP was David Johnson. He had 14.5 points per game. The reason this went to Zeke is The Price is Right was 4-5 when Zeke played, and he averaged 63 points a game. Without Zeke, he was 0-4 and averaged less than 40. Unbelievably, his team, well, it wasn't just Ezekiel Elliott, because 13 points, it was 24-point difference there. But without that, he had to pull up some other guys, and his receivers weren't the best anyway. So it was probably the most deserving team that was looking like possibly playoffs, especially if Zeke would have played those last couple weeks. And I think The Price is Right lost by like 5 points a week in those last couple games. So easily would have probably been a playoff team without it. But without Zeke, he was bad and 0-4, and he missed the playoffs and ended up with the worst record in the league and the lowest points in the league. So kind of crazy how that all went. So finally, a reminder that the top games next week, Bruisers versus Little Big Men, and then the OK Bowl, we'll see the Badgers versus the Garbage Men. So good luck to everyone. Next year, the draft will be August 26th, which is a Sunday. I would hope as many as you can come as possible, especially some of the people that live close. Rebec, hopefully. Obviously, Bites and Griff, you guys are a long ways away. Don't expect that. But hopefully, like a Rebec can make it. Reisner's not too far away. Scott, God forbid, can leave Marinette County. Chet, hopefully. It would be nice to have it. It was our 25th year. Also, Legends League is coming back, which will happen. I don't know if it'll be before our draft or the other one. But that'll be kind of fun next year. That'll increase the point value, and then the ultimate winner of the Super Bowl will get an extra $120, I think it is. So that is that. Good luck to the competitors of the league in the OK Bowl and the Super Bowl, and I'll see you guys next year for fantasy. I'm on a fantasy sabbatical now until summer. So I'm going to do what Ricky Williams did and head into Nepal and learn from the best Tibetan masters, because I'm sure that's what Ricky Williams did for his year off. So good luck to all, and see you next year.